So legislation like Prop 39 and Measure G have resulted in OUSD public schools and charter schools competing for resources. How will you navigate this situation to ensure equitable distribution of resources, funding, and access to district-owned property?
I think again the issue has been the fact that we shouldn't be competing for resources. First of all, that's the wrong platform. They started with the funding. You got to take a step back, and as a board, we need to evaluate, assess which school districts are needing the funds. Because we're talking about equity at this point. We're not even talking about which is the best school. We can't decide which school is good or which is bad if they weren't given or provided the proper training, the proper resources for them to succeed, or in the assessment in which they need to take, in which they can organize and structure how they go about making a better environment for the students. If we have done that before and everybody was in the same level playing field, then yeah, we go in that direction to be competitive. But being the fact that we're not equal to begin with, and the fact that some zip codes are richer than others, we can't approach that way in which we distribute those funds. So the first thing will be, again, and going back to the idea of reevaluating how those funds are being redistributed. First action will be to evaluate every school site, provide teachers with the training and support they need, because every school site is different. We cannot do this on a cookie cutter approach, which is what got us in trouble to begin with in the last 20 years. We tried it before, it hasn't worked. It's just insane to try it again, expecting different outcomes. So my thing will be reevaluating the whole structure, replan the whole thing, and actually look at what the teachers have been asking. Because that right there is a solution. They know what the problem is at the school sites. We got to look at this on a case-by-case scenario and see where they need support and see how we can, at a district level, provide that support. So that will be my way of approaching that.
Thank you.
It says legislation like Prop 39 and Measure G have resulted in OUSD public schools and charter schools competing for resources. How will you navigate this situation to ensure equitable distribution of resources, funding, and access to district-owned property?
Well, that's a very difficult question, With Prop 39, I know that there's a disruption right now in one of the schools in my district, which is Howard Elementary, because they are an inclusive elementary. That means that they take in children with learning disorders and try to combine them with children that are not. And one of the rooms that they used was to contain the children that might have episodes. So I know that one of those children are when my son was going to Howard Elementary, was my son Ketsta, because he was also enduring some because of his condition, he was sometimes having meltdowns at school, and I believe that room was used to contain him so that he can be able to go back and be safe, for him, provide safety for himself and for other children. So for me to realize that room was taken away from that school who's serving special needs children and that need them was very hard for me to deal with. And that was part of Proposition 39. So there are changes that need to happen. We cannot continue to disrupt the schools, that are already providing this service. They might not be using the room, every single minute or every single hour, but that room does have a purpose. And it's meant to provide a resource for children like my children that are special needs, are special learners, and that do have some of them behavioral disorders. So for me, it's about revisiting that law and making the changes so that no children or no school feels that impact of just being disrupted or, having to sacrifice, space that is meant to provide a safe space for children to be able to be successful in school.
Legislation like Prop 39 and Measure G have resulted in OUSD schools and charter schools competing for resources.
Yes.
How will you navigate this situation to ensure the equitable distribution of resources, funding, and access to district-owned property?
You know, protocol has to be set in order for that to be actuated. And if protocol is not set, and I think that's part of what policy making is, for what, as a board member, what we have to do. We have to make sure that equity and uniformity is set up correctly. And if that's not done, then of course you can't follow through and have a defined process in what's going on. So as a board member, I would insist on real equity and transparency of individuals following the proper protocol in order to access either or going through the process of Prop 39 for building resources or buildings, I should say, and then also the monies that are allocated through Measure G. Now it's really, I'm kind of excited that I have a friend, excuse me, who sits on, excuse me, on the board for Measure G. And so we have a conversation pretty often because I am very much opposed to monies being used and not being accounted for. In addition to that, I'm very much opposed to people doing things clandestinely so that others aren't aware of it. So I believe a great deal in transparency. Actually, and you didn't ask this, but I am the president of the Oakland Alliance of Black Educators, and this person sits on my board. And so we have conversations because I want to make sure that all students have equal access to what is available to them. Because many times we have a habit of placing almost a scarlet letter on students if they do not perform well. Well, if we have not, being the board, if we have not given the proper resources, then it all falls on us.